Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Voices, Envoy Magazine's official podcast. My name is Stephanie Filion, and I'm editor-in-chief of Envoy Magazine. And welcome to this episode in which we discuss our special issue on the UN Secretary-General race. So today I have the pleasure of having with me Stefano Vacara, who is the founder of La Voce di New York, who also is the correspondent for Ital Press and an Envoy contributor. Stefano, thank you so much for being with us. Stefano, you've been covering the UN for what, about 20 years?
Yes, I would say even more.
Thank you so much for being with us. And I think for this issue, you've authored a very instrumental piece because before talking about the next Secretary General, it was very important to revisit the role of the Secretary General and how the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has shaped the role moving forward. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit why you wanted to report this story?
I wanted to report, first of all, thank you for having me. And I think Envoy is such a cool magazine that the UN really needed. You know, a magazine that is basically produced and written by people that are not working for the UN. When Antonio Guterres became Secretary General, the process for him to become Secretary General was a little bit different than in the past. It was kind of open. They did the interviews. We could all see there were a lot of candidates. And he was the best, the brightest and the best. You know, everybody could see. For my work, especially at that time, I mean, the years before, I was covering a lot issue with migration, refugees, and he was the head of UNHCR. So, okay, part of being a former prime minister. Didn't know him personally, but I could see he was a really, strong candidate. Expectations were enormous because he was not like a weak, I would say, a lightweight Secretary General. He was like a very, very strong candidate. So I think that's what made me take this big challenge of say, okay, how did he do it? Well, I had to say, and remember we had a conversation about it. I was at the beginning of this adventure to write this article. I was I didn't want to be biased, but I was thinking like, I expected so much about him. He didn't deliver, But journalism is something that you have to take aside this. And when I start to explore and asking questions and work a lot on this piece, I realized that, was much more complicated.
Yes, and because ultimately, there are a lot of people who are unhappy with the Secretary General right now. I think there's no denying it. I think when you walk around the UN's walls, or even when you talk to people in the United States, there is a general sense that the UN isn't delivering on its essential mission. But I guess your piece kind of shows that yes, there are issues with the UN, but does it go back to the person that Antonio Guterres is himself, or does it go back to the role in the institution?
Exactly. Yeah. I realize, we all, as a journalist, we are human, and usually the subject of our writing becomes, a hate-love relationship. You get involved with the focus, and you forget there is not only the person, but there is all around the structured institution where this person could be the brightest, the best and the brightest. But if you put him, and so that's also why came the idea. I started to think, and I actually consulted with you. I like your style. You are an editor that are always there with your open door. You don't wait for the journalist to come at the end of the piece. You want to help if there is any situation. And right away I came to you and said, I came up with this idea. I was pessimistic. I was something of already kind of pessimistic about Guterres, how he performed. But then I started, while I was doing the interview and studying how he was doing, I started to realize, what if actually he was one of the greatest pilot, but he had the wrong car to drive. So I started basically saying like, oh, he had a Ferrari, like the UN was a Ferrari, and he decided to drive it like a Fiat 500. Now, when I say Fiat 500, Fiat 500, Italians, what they would say, oh, you drive like with a Fiat 500. They're not talking about the Fiat 500 of these years, in the last 15 years. Those are like pretty good cars. We're talking about the Fiat 500, the 60s and 70s that were very small and slow cars, okay? They're pretty, but slow. So I was thinking in the beginning of when I started the research, I was thinking, yeah, the UN should have done much more. It's like, Guterres didn't drive the car. But then I realized, what if it was actually the contrary? This when, I was starting to get more analysis, especially for people that know the inside of UN, I would say much better than me, because I'm a journalist, I cover, but I cannot know the daily situation, people that really worked inside. And I realized there could be actually also a different situation. That maybe, yes, the pilot was skilled. Maybe he knew how to do things, how to take curve. He would have known many things. But what if actually the institution itself had become, maybe in the beginning, or the way it was, the way President Roosevelt and the others, were imagining it could have been a Ferrari. But what if it's today, this institution actually is like a slow car, and you then ask a good, skilled pilot still to drive it like a Ferrari. So in trying to balance in the two things, we looked in the piece in many things. Because also the Secretary-General, of course, he doesn't do only one thing. He does many things. So he was, I think, on the end of the piece, the reader will understand that Guterres, well, I don't want to reveal too much, but I think he was able to, in this formal one of the global geopolitics, he was able to, in certain part of his job, certain sector of what is his job, he was able still to perform at the maximum of his potential. The other part, he was not.
Right, and yeah, I mean, we're not going to spoil anything about your piece, but it is such a fun lens to look at it through this lens of the Fiat versus the Ferrari. And it is the longest piece that I've ever published in Envoy, but I did feel when reading it that it deserves all the space that it got, because when we look at the term of Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General over the past 10 years, when we think about all the crises that he had to deal with, when we think about the COVID-19 pandemic, when we think about the war in Ukraine, when you think about what's happening in the Middle East right now, what's happening over there for the past 3-4 years. So Stefano, I think you really looked at key events during his tenure to kind of see how his own position has evolved, and also what people thought his reaction was. So tell us a little bit about who you talked to during your reporting, and also for you, like what were the major turning points of Antonio Guterres' term?
Okay, first of all, when a Secretary General is still on his job, he will be until end of December. It was very difficult to have people to talk publicly about him, especially people that are involved. I was able, but sometimes there was like, not all the time, but sometimes there was a refusal. They would talk to me, but then they would say, okay, but I don't want to. And then I said, but can I use? No, I don't want. I just talk to you just to help you, And so, I took the material as a background, but I really couldn't really use it, at least not in quote anything. Then there were people that actually talked to me, and and I would say also to you, because you helped me find people that will talk, okay, on record. on record, I had people that talked on record, but of course, the people that talk on record were either people that worked with Secretary General before, I mean, in the past, either with him, but especially with other Secretary General, with Kofi Annan, with Ban Ki-moon, and so on. And then, of course, academics. That it's easier, if you go and find academics from very important institution. I remember Professor Williams from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy is good because those are academic there. Yes, they publish books, they analyze the UN, but they had also experience. He worked, for example, for Kofi Annan and Ban Ki-moon and so on. So, and journalists. Yes, journalists talk to journalists, especially if the journalists that you talk with, you think, you admire them, and you think that for their background, they cover the UN, you always admire them, and you always admire the skill. And there is one in particular, Colin Lynch, is my kind of hero in journalists covering the UN, because you don't see him very much. I mean, in a sense, he doesn't go like me every day there asking questions and blah, blah, blah in the briefing. But when he comes, you can see the room, he's silent. And when he has a question, you can see he has a scoop behind that. So he always, and I was able, the column, he's a former journalist from the Washington Post. Now he works for Devex. He's a grain. I would put him on the top of the list of journalists, of good, very, very bright, good journalists that cover the UN. He gave me he spent with me so much time. I'm so grateful for him because he gave me anything he had to get on his thought about how Guterres performed. So we have former ambassador, academics, journalists. I try to cover, I have a different spectrum. I have to say that because I know after so many years, I know so many people, I know a special envoy that will have been the perfect. I admire him so much. I can't say the name. And he helped me, gave me, I don't know, a couple just a direction, but at the same time, he told me, I can't do it because, of course, he's still working for the UN. So there was, I think I'm very satisfied. I didn't believe, when you told me I'm going to publish all, I was shocked because I sent you, I sent all the things I sent you thinking, okay, I hope that this at least, I don't know, 50, 60% of this make it, right? When you told me, with little, of course, your little stylish correction and everything, but when you told me we're going to publish all, I was shocked because it's a long piece, but I'm honored that Envoy chose to. It was a long work, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, but really, and I don't know if it's changed your own perception of the Secretary General race that we're in right now, and what the next Secretary General has to deal with when it comes to the institution. But I think really your piece really kind of sets the stage for that. So what do you think were the turning point in Antonio Guterres' term? And also, what surprised you? Like, did you maybe understand anything about the role that you didn't fully realize while reporting it? Anything surprised you when you were reporting the story?
Okay, I had to say one thing that I didn't say before when you asked me why you were curious. I mean, why you wanted to do this kind of piece? Okay, the assessment of a work of it, because I've been teaching for more than 15 years now to a college at the City University of New York. It's Lehman College. I do other courses about media, but I do a course in particular. It's called Covering the United Nations. And it's the way to, that we pretend to cover the United Nations with the students, but in reality what we do is they learn about the work of the United Nations pretending to be journalists, okay, during the course and so on. Now, in this course, we covered a lot of things, Security Council, General Assembly, so much. But there is always the subject of the UN Secretary General that is the one that, capture more their attention. And when they start to cover the Secretary General, is where the frustration comes out. Usually you think like, oh, the frustration will come up with this, with the Security Council, right? Why the Security Council doesn't do this? Why doesn't act that? Blah, blah, blah. But the Security Council, they understand right away. Of course, great powers, veto power, some harm. So they kind of, when they start to understand how it works, they say, well, it's obvious the way it performs. It's like for them, it doesn't surprise them. Instead, with the security, in my 15 years at it, no, with this course, it started 2012. So 13 years of teaching this course, I noticed that the figure of the Secretary General is what bothers them the most. And they always, because they study, I make sure that they study history of that, and they are fascinating, for example, of the figure of Doug Hammarskjöld. And they say, why they don't all do like Doug Hammarskjöld? Look, he was trying everything. They really, but then they figure out also, it actually is the only Secretary General that died on the job. And that's not me saying, now is the UN even saying that his death is not anymore just an accident. So they, when they study the figure of the Secretary General, they want to see a Secretary General assertive, assert at the limit of their power. And they never see it. They only recognize that in, I would say, in Doug Hammarskjöld, and yes, Kofi Annan in certain part of his. So I wanted to do this piece because I wanted to have a piece where I could give also to my students, when you publish it, I will make sure that they will be able to read it on every course, also this piece. Because I realize, and to answer your question, I know I took it longer, but I realized that for I had so much criticism about the performance of Guterres. I still have in certain part. But the job is much more complicated and difficult, and things that I didn't expect or I didn't think about it, that we had to say that what it was being said, that he's the most, actually not the most difficult, is the most impossible job on earth, is the case. So any man or woman that in the future will have the courage to take this job on, we have to be a little bit more respectful, understanding. Listen, you really need, I don't say you need to be Superman or Superwoman, but it's not as easy, or it's much more complicated than the job really, what we know superficially about the job.
Stefano, maybe one last question for you before I let you go. Would you run for Secretary General after examining the role that closely?
Me? I could not, because I would be fired by, let's say, I think I will last probably a couple of weeks on the job. I would be fired, and it would be the moment, it would be probably historical, because it would be the moment where all the P5 of the Security Council will finally agree on something, on fire Stefano Vacara from the secretary, from the job.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Stefano, for being with us today. And your piece, Ferrari Driven Like a Fiat 500, is available in Envoys Magazine special issue on the Secretary General race. And I encourage our viewers, listeners to take a read because there is a lot of reporting and a lot of work that's gone into it. And there's a lot to learn from that story. Stefano, thank you so much. Grazie mille.
Thank you, Stephanie. And it's an honor working with Envoy and especially with you.
Thank you.